It's the Marty and Party podcast, presented by 4011 Sports.
Wow. First win of the year for the Jets. And you know what? I loved it. They were talking about boy genius Sean McVay. He had 12 days to prepare for the Jets. This was the number one defense in the league. Still is, right? And they just got absolutely embarrassed. Not by the margin of victory or anything, but just the quality of ball that they were playing was just subpar. The Jets are not a good team. Everyone knows this. They did play well. They had a great game plan, right? And they just attacked the weaknesses in the Rams' defense, and the Rams just couldn't respond. They didn't know what to do. I was shocked. But, it's a great win. I'm happy. I'm happy for the guys. Mekhi Becton said, he tweeted after the game, picture of Kobe after the championship, just clutching the trophy. He said, "This is how I feel, even though it's a regular season win." And I loved it. I loved that. But you know what really bothered me? A lot of people out here saying, "Oh, you don't understand. This loss has just put the Jets in the basement for the next decade plus. You took away hope. I can't be a fan of this team." First of all, I don't want to be a fan of a team where its players don't even want to win, who don't try to win, right? It's a professional sport. You're doing this at the highest level. I expect you. These are 52 grown men, right? 53, my apologies. Grown men, right? Working towards a common goal. And if they can't try to win together, they can't do anything together.
And not to mention, one of the guys on the field stands a lot to lose if the team goes 0-16, and that's Sam Darnold. I don't understand why people think that coming in last place and getting the first overall pick is
guaranteed to get you out of the position you're in.
Can we go over number one? I mean, we already did it. We already went over number one overall picks that busted. We did it a few podcasts ago. And let me just remind you guys, a lot of the busts were at that quarterback position. Did anyone watch Sam Bradford play when he was breaking all the records in college and throwing over a 70% completion percentage and think, this guy's not going to make it in the NFL? There's no guarantees. As good of a prospect as Trevor Lawrence is.
And he is a damn good prospect.
And he looks great. He looked great since high school. I also heard on the radio a lot, they said if he went out his freshman year, he would have been the number one overall pick. Let me just tell you how crazy that statement is. He didn't even start the first game for Clemson when he was a freshman. He battled for the position and got it around week 4 or 5 and looked really good doing it and ended up winning the national championship. But to say a guy's going to go and be the number one overall pick his freshman year coming out of high school is a complete lie. Not to mention when you talk about other prospects coming out those years, like if that was the case, he would have been going against Tua as the number one overall pick.
Not to mention how stacked these Clemson teams are. That place is wide receiver U.
And plays in a very weak conference.
Super weak, so you're going to look great.
But I want to get on to what I think, because I heard a lot of people talking about how devastating a win for this was for the Jets franchise. And I hear a lot of people thinking that this is the worst thing that could ever happen to them. And I'm going to argue with, no, the worst thing that can ever happen to a team is they sit along with I think only 3 other teams to ever do it and actually have a winless season. It's the only sport you really can do it. I mean, baseball, you're not going to go 0-162. It's an incredibly embarrassing feat to have where you go 0-16. You sit in the record books forever and you are a laughingstock. And for people to say, oh, well, at least I guarantee myself a franchise quarterback. No. Teams get quarterbacks all over the draft. Not just with the number one pick, not even just in the first round. And with the risk that you take when you take a quarterback in the first round, you're basically setting your clock back 5 years.
Well, the clock starts ticking. As soon as you draft your quarterback, you're on the clock.
Mm-hmm. But what I want to think is this. With the Jets, when they take, let's say they stick with Sam D, which is what I think they should do, and they go out and use this pick to actually build around them. And let's say that Sammy D isn't the answer in 2 years. you take this year and then you take his 5th-year option. You spend time to build around Sammy D now. You get him a right tackle. You get him a number 1 wide receiver. And what's the worst that happens if he turns out to be a bust in 2 years? Now you have a right tackle, an all-pro left tackle that you're going to have in Mekhi Becton, and a wide receiver that when you drop a new rookie quarterback in, because I'll tell you what, he's not going to be the last quarterback to ever come out of an NFL draft. 2 years from now, we're going to be gooing and guying over another quarterback. What's the worst that happens about actually giving a guy a chance to succeed?
That's what kills me. You know, everyone talking about how this is the worst possible thing. You know, losing out on Trevor Lawrence is just the worst thing that could ever happen. No, I mean, there's going to be other quarterbacks, and I still believe in Sam Darnold. The Jets have some pieces.
What do you think about this party?
The Jets can't take a quarterback in the top of this draft. I'm so happy for them that they aren't the number 1 overall pick, so they feel obligated to take Trevor Lawrence. Personally, I would trade the first overall pick in a heartbeat if I'm the Jets.
They would have never done it.
I don't think they would have done it, and I also thought all week that this is probably the best thing to ever happen to the Jets.
Absolutely.
Where you take that pressure off of, we have to take the next John Elway, and you actually start looking at your roster and saying, this is the exact, pieces we need. You saw it with the Tennessee Titans. They went 2-14, and the year before they went 3-13, where they got the number 1 pick the one year and the number 2 pick the year before. And they used that number 2 pick to trade picks and move around and start building a roster. The Rams did it a couple years earlier when they traded out of the RG3 pick. It's so much better to use those picks on value instead of taking a one-position player and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gamble. Look, the Bengals took Joe Burrow, which they should have done, but look what happened because they didn't give him adequate protection. He's out for the season.
Mm-hmm. And how many times, like Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, how many times did you see teams, before they had the proper team in place, put a quarterback in there, and the guy fails? And it's like, well, did he fail because he just didn't pan out, or did he fail because he gets sacked an average of 7 times a game, and he just doesn't have any time in the pocket or any time to develop?
It blows my mind when people say, he hasn't shown enough in 3 years, Sam Darnold, to prove that he can, be a starter in this league. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Ryan Tannehill is peaking after the age of 30. Mm-hmm. And quarterbacks can play now into their 40s. You're seeing it in the NFL. So in what world do you already know Sam Darnold's done? You don't.
23 years old. That's all you need to know about Sam Darnold.
But let me throw a couple trade offers at you, because now I agree that the Jets shouldn't go quarterback, but I also think that there's an immense amount of pressure to take a different quarterback and go a different direction. You have a pretty new GM. Probably by, in 3 weeks from now, you're going to have a new head coach.
Hopefully.
And
that's not a given.
No, it's not a given, and it might not be the worst thing in the world to keep him one more year.
It might be.
If you don't take a quarterback...
Sam Darnold's not going to get better with Adam Gase there, man. He's
probably
just
not. But he also didn't get any better. He didn't look as good when he was with...
this is a third system.
Third system. Well, quarterbacks do very well at that. But let me talk to you about the importance of a quarterback. Now, I know who has the number 1 pick now is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let me read you off a stat line, and I want to tell you who it is, and I want you to tell me if it's a good game or a bad game. 228 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions.
It's fine.
Fine game. What if I told you that quarterback lost 14-40?
It's rough.
You're going to go and put Trevor Lawrence in the Jaguars? What's he going to do? You just lost 14-40 to the Ravens. What stats does a quarterback have to put up? And this is the perfect proof that it's not just a quarterback in the NFL. What stat line does he have to put up? 500 yards with 17 touchdowns?
People are going to argue, right, that, stats are misleading. These were short passes, quick passes, and that if they had Trevor Lawrence, he would be able to take the top off the defense and move the team better. But
I mean, it's like 7 incompletions. He went 22 for 29. You could not have. That's a winning stat line for a quarterback. You're gonna put Trevor Lawrence, a rookie quarterback, in there, and what are you expecting is gonna happen?
the Jaguars really did Gardner Minshew dirty, man. They should have just let him play the whole season. See what you have.
So now here's what I'm thinking if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars and I hold the number 1 pick. I want to trade that pick so bad. There are so many holes on this team. If you put a quarterback in, I don't care how good he is. Gardner Minshew was sacked 5 times. 5 times. Do the math on that. 5 times 16. That's a ton of sacks. If you go out and take a quarterback in the first round, you're not getting your team any better. You're not making your blocking situation better. You're not improving your defense. You're not getting any offensive weapons. You're literally trading out a guy who on Sunday had 7 incompletions, no turnovers, and 2 touchdowns, for a guy that might put up 30 more yards with 10 more throws. That's not going to improve your team. You're going to be sitting there at 3-13 next year saying, "Oh, well, I thought we had John Elway." But you don't have a left tackle, you don't have a right tackle, you don't have any number 1 targets on this team. And your running back has to put up 1,000 yards as an undrafted rookie because there's nothing else going on. He's 3rd in the league in rushing. There's nothing on this team.
Insane. Well, you see, the tackle thing, they tried. They took Cam Robinson for left tackle. They have Jawan Taylor, who they just used the 7th pick on at right tackle. I mean, they have some pieces, on offense especially, but on defense, nothing. I like DJ Chark as a number 1, but you have to be able to throw it to him.
On 34 dropbacks, you have 5 sacks.
It's bad.
Ben Roethlisberger dropped back, 55 times and gets sacked like twice.
Offensive line is...
But we're gonna pretend like it's just a quarterback. We're gonna put a 6'4" Trevor Lawrence or however tall he is,
6'6",
and he's gonna run around like a maniac trying to avoid every single pass rusher in the NFL.
And you know what that's a good recipe for? Getting hurt.
Yeah. Oh, of course. And that's why I think that this pick needs to get moved. So I have 2 teams in mind. One is the Jets, Jets. It makes a lot of sense. The Jets have a lot of draft capital. They have a young quarterback that could be included in the trade. So what I'm thinking here, and I'll just get your feedback on it, not as a Jets fan, but as someone who could see it happening. You get Sam Darnold and the number 2 pick in the draft, and let's just say one of the Seattle Seahawks picks for the 2021 draft, and the 2nd round pick that also came in the Jamal Adams trade.
I think that if you're talking to only Jets fans who are dead set on Trevor Lawrence, they will say do it every day of the week.
They take it as a steal.
But when you're trying to actually build a winning football team, those are the types of things that derail you if you get it wrong. So he looks like a great prospect, but we just talked about injuries. We just talked about poor offensive line with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Almost all of that is the same for the Jets, except they have worse offensive talent. So you need to keep Sam Darnold, keep the number 2 overall pick, draft Penei Sewell or a top-of-the-line weapon on the offense, and then use the rest of the picks to beef up the O-line and defense, and see if Sam Darnold can go.
Now, what do you think about that trade, Brian? Can you see it happening?
No, I don't think if the Jaguars end up with the number 1 pick, they are not going to trade it. They are going to view Trevor Lawrence as, I guess, the quarterback to bring them to relevancy. The Steve McNair of the Oilers, the Warren Moon of the Seahawks, kind of getting that expansion team, that team that no one really thinks about. Make them a market. Make them big, make them huge. But in the event they do, they pick up the phone, they ask the Jets, and they say, "Hey, we'll give this to you if you give us Sam Darnold and some picks." Do I do it? No, I don't do it. Not for a second. Sam Darnold has been mistreated by this organization at every step in his career, right? So the fact that he even says that he wants to be a Jet for life, insane. Blows my mind. Love the guy. Great kid. But if you want to give him a fair shot, you have to build around him. Get him Penei Sewell.
And what about a similar trade offer, not to the Jets, but a little bit farther back? Let's say Trevor Lawrence maybe to a team like the Eagles, where you pull Carson Wentz back on the return. I have heard a couple things on the media talking about how if they trade Carson Wentz after July 1st or something like that, they'll be able to take his dead cap money, split it over 2 years. I think there is an argument to be made that you might want to just take all your dead cap in 1 year and stink for 1 year. But there is a way to remain competitive and make this trade happen where you move Carson Wentz and maybe 2 first-round picks over. Anyone who says that is unlikely to happen or that's impossible to happen, I'd like to remind you that the same Eagles team with Chip Kelly offered the Tennessee Titans 2 first-round picks, along with, I believe, Sam Bradford for the Marcus Mariota pick a couple years ago. There is a market set out for it. You've seen quarterbacks don't get traded too often, but it is possible, and they are floated around. What do you think about something like that?
Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts I like, but I think if I'm the Eagles, I like to get a little bit more of a secure option.
I think the reason we're seeing Jalen Hurts on the field is because the owner wants him out there. And Carson Wentz just has been playing so poorly, so consistently, that, Doug Peterson had no choice.
I mean, if the Eagles really want Trevor Lawrence, they could easily make trades for both their quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz both go. Because Jalen Hurts his stock is definitely rising. Whether or not just on the Eagles, I guarantee you there are a couple GMs around the league thinking, damn, why don't I have this guy?
That's a good point. I mean, it would be very bold. That's a very bold move.
Depending on the capital you can get back from both, if it's not more pieces for the quarterback or the defense, they might be able to pull it off. Whether or not they do it is completely different.
Well, let's just assume that both of those trades don't happen. Now, I want to run down the top few quarterback prospects that I've seen this year, and I'm gonna go with 4, and then I'm gonna explain number 5. So number 1 is Trevor Lawrence. I'm not a guy that likes to buy into hype. I'm not a guy that likes to see a guy and think there's no way that this guy doesn't pan out well. And I think in a moderately decent system, Trevor Lawrence has every single tool that would make somebody successful in this league. I don't think it's impossible for him to fail because I think there's a lot of coaches out there that could ruin him. There's a lot of systems that can ruin him. And if you put a guy in a system where all he's doing is running for his life, I don't care who it is, eventually they'll break. The amount of hits I saw Andrew Luck take his first 2 years in the league, I was shocked that he was never hurt until eventually he did break. But remember the first couple of years of Andrew Luck, everyone just thought he was like Superman because he was getting hit almost every single play and getting up.
He was playing through so many injuries too.
So I think he's a can't-miss prospect. I don't think he's going to come in the league and be a top 10 quarterback his rookie year. I don't even think that he'll probably win Rookie of the Year if he does come in, because if he ends up with the Jaguars, he's going to have a lot more to worry about than just putting up stats. He's going to be making sure that his femur stays intact the whole year and he doesn't get absolutely crushed. The number 2 quarterback, this guy I wasn't a big fan of. Now, I do like Alabama football. But I always...
You can't put Mac Jones down.
I listen.
Mac Jones,
5 touchdowns. He is absolutely torn up.
He's perfect for their system.
He's torn up the SEC.
A.J. McCarron did too.
A.J. McCarron...
Not on this level, but he also didn't have these kind of receivers, man.
Mac Jones, let me go on record here, deserves to be the Heisman. He deserves to be the Heisman. Trevor Lawrence does not deserve to be the Heisman.
I agree.
Stats are... I think Mac Jones is throwing 77% completion percentage. That's unheard of in the SEC.
I mean, Joe Burrow did it.
In a season where there's no There's no cupcake games. There's no, we're scheduling Citadel week 2. We're scheduling Appalachian State week 1. There's none of that. This is all SEC. These are going against all coaches that are making millions of dollars in salary. And he has absolutely crushed them.
I think it's a big thing, though. You don't know how he will look with worse talent, with less talent around him, without a brick wall in front of him.
But that can be said about anyone.
But especially Mac Jones, because Mac Jones doesn't do things that make you go wow.
Now,
what makes you go wow are his stats.
His stats, his accuracy, and his consistency.
He doesn't jump off the page. It's not like he has a cannon. Like, he can make throws, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He can throw the ball, but he's not exceptionally accurate. He doesn't have an exceptional strong arm. He's not exceptionally mobile. He's fine.
I think he's this year's Joe Burrow.
Oh, no way.
I don't think I thought about him at all.
No way.
I didn't think about him at all. I didn't have him as a top 5 round prospect going into this year. And now I think he should be the number 2 quarterback taken.
No way.
And he should go top 5. Number 3 on this list, great performance yesterday. Moved ahead of my number 4 guy, who I am just as high on. I think the number 2 through 4 guys, I am very high on all 4 of them. All 3 of them. But I'm going to go with Zach Wilson here. The guy plays he's in a good system, on a good program that plays bad teams, but he puts up big stats and he shows you on tape every single time that he can do basically anything. He's got a pretty big arm. He's got pretty decent mobility and just does everything that you want to see a quarterback do. Does he do it at the next level? That's tough to say because when you're playing in BYU, it's a little different than playing in the NFL. But I do like him. Any feeling on Zach Wilson here?
I like Zach Wilson. I'm fine with him being in the top 5 because I personally, as you can tell, no one here also likes Justin Fields.
Yeah, you're going to have to wait. I got a little thing on Justin Fields later on when we get through the list.
I mean, you're saying you're high on these quarterbacks, right? But you have to admit that there's a very big gap between Trevor Lawrence and the field.
I don't think so. I think that Trevor Lawrence has every tool a quarterback can have. Does that equate to NFL success that Zach?
I think he
Zach
has the best
Wilson,
chance.
He's going to be a starting quarterback for 10 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Is he going to be a good starting quarterback for 10 years? Probably. Do I see the ceiling?
He has the highest floor and highest ceiling.
I don't
in
think he
this
has the
draft
highest
class.
ceiling.
Who would have higher?
I don't because the next
Any
guy.
quarterback that doesn't go to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
That's fair.
The next guy I think has the highest ceiling.
Okay, irrespective of team. Okay, his floor and ceiling is by far higher than anyone else. You said you think someone else has a higher ceiling.
The floor.
Who
the
do
floor
you think
has the highest.
Okay,
floor.
who do you think has the highest
I'm
ceiling?
going with my number 4 QB prospect. Guy absolutely torched Alabama. How many points did he put up? 38. Kyle Trask has looked phenomenal.
He's this year's Joe Burrow.
Has
Jones
looked
is not this year's
phenomenal. He has done it. He's the only quarterback on this list right now that's doing it against better teams than he's playing on. He did it against Alabama.
That's true. That's a good point.
He is the only person that's playing better talent. His defense doesn't bail him out, and he has to literally win every game by himself. And he almost did it against Alabama. And I'll tell you what.
I wouldn't say by
this
himself.
Alabama team, I think they're going to lose to Clemson, by the way, in the national championship. But this Alabama team is the best Alabama team I've seen in some years. Their defense plays very solid. Their offense with Mac Jones is very solid. But he almost beat him. And that's very impressive. I always hold quarterbacks who beat Alabama to high standards. It sometimes is wrong, right? When you have Johnny Manziel beat Alabama, you say, uh-oh, that's a problem. But Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson both beat Alabama. And
Joe Burrow.
And Joe Burrow, and they're all looking pretty good in the NFL. So I think it's a pretty good barometer.
I agree with you when you say that, Alabama, Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, we lost you there. But what I think is, I'm just going to follow up one more
Lost
thing.
my train there.
Yeah,
This is what it was. Kyle Trask, you said nobody. He has Kyle Pitts, who actually should be in the conversation for Heisman, and he has this Tony guy. That offense is popping. It has great weapons everywhere. Defense, no help.
It also helps when you have a quarterback that's playing out of his mind.
Definitely better than Felipe Franks.
That's a fact. Felipe Frank's trash.
At number 5 quarterback prospect, guy's 23 years old, played 3 years in the NFL. I'm going Sammy D. Sam Darnold is still crazy young. He's a year older than Joe Burrow?
Yeah.
He's
Sam
a year.
Darnold will be 24 at the start of the 2021 season.
If I'm a team right now and I'm going into the draft and I'm going into the offseason and I'm looking for a young quarterback that I want to build my team around, you cannot tell me that there is anyone else outside those 4 guys that you would be more excited and more comfortable with handing the keys to the franchise than Sammy D.
My thing with Sam Darnold is a lot of the things are fixable. You know, his mechanics, his footwork got a little sloppy this year under Gase, but, you know, prior to that, you were seeing improvements, and you could see it in the way he throws the ball. But now, it's all gone. But I still think you can fix him. He's not unsalvageable.
If you told me 4 years ago, at the start of Sammy D's season in college, after his
Rose Bowl.
after the Rose Bowl win against Penn State, that in 3 years or 4 years from now, any NFL team could get a swipe at him, I would tell you you're absolutely out of your mind. He was, and people pretend like they didn't say this, he is what they were talking about Trevor Lawrence. That same conversation that you have about Trevor Lawrence, he can do everything. He's crazy accurate. He makes the position look easy. It's the same exact thing people were saying about Sam Darnold. They pretend like they didn't say it. They pretend like they haven't talked up quarterbacks since John Elway or Andrew Luck. Quarterbacks get talked up a ton. I completely agreed with it when I saw Sammy D play in college. I actually thought Sammy D was a better prospect than Andrew Luck. I think I was wrong thinking that, but I still have him at a high regard. And to say that there's anyone besides those 5 guys that are going to be loose in this offseason, up for grabs, I think you're crazy.
You know, the main difference, I think, between the Darnold and Trevor Lawrence, hype was that Darnold was in a class where there were a lot more highly regarded quarterback prospects, And this one is just Trevor Lawrence, and everyone else is kind of a maybe, right? But that year you had Baker Mayfield, you had Josh Allen, who people loved, you had Josh Rosen. That's the only reason
Lamar Jackson.
That's the only reason that they weren't talking about Sam Darnold as the clear number 1.
Mm-hmm. And he was really only taken over because of the amazing season that Baker Mayfield had. And that pick that Baker Mayfield had was really a last-second pick.
Yeah, going into the college football season, the Cleveland Browns were definitely not thinking Baker Mayfield's our guy.
No way.
No way. The Jets need to be careful, though, because if they do get rid of Sam Darnold, they have to make sure he goes far away.
Oh, it's going to hurt wherever he goes.
I think so. I think he's going to go somewhere and blossom.
You're going to watch him play on another team. And I think that there's 3 teams that make a lot of sense for him. I think the Redskins or the Washington football team make a ton of sense for him. I don't think he's going to want to go over to the Steelers because I don't think he's necessarily going to want to sit a year. I feel like he's basically sat enough this year due to injuries. So I think them. I think Carolina might want to take a long look at them. I do love Teddy Bridgewater. I know they signed him to a deal. And then the last team is the Patriots, which I think
no way.
I don't think he'll end up there because the Jets would have to okay it.
That would be slap them in the face.
Would be the biggest steal of all. It would be bigger steal than it wouldn't be. It would be on the same level of steal as Bill Belichick just leaving them to go to the Pats.
Honestly, it
would be the same.
But he would be so good there.
He would be so good there. The last team I think is if the Jacksonville Jaguars have a brain, they would take a long look at him.
I don't want him to go there. He will not have fun.
No, he won't have fun, but it would make a ton of sense.
See, okay, so here's the big thing for me. You're sitting there at number 2. You can't feel obligated to Sam Darnold or your fan base or your owner or whatever. You have to rely on your experience as a GM, as a scout in this business. Joe Douglas, if there is a quarterback that you like, that you're convinced is the future of this team, you take him. You don't hesitate. But just because you think Sam Darnold is done or you're hearing he's done, don't let that affect the way you evaluate these guys. Because before you know it, you might be talking yourself into some of these people.
this is also a really tough year to take a quarterback. And I say that because it's a shortened season. It's a season that you're probably not going to have this extensive combine like you usually do. The pro days are probably going to be a little wacky. You're not really getting a full look at guys. You got 5 games out of Ohio State. You've had an extremely, reduced schedule. And I think if you're going to evaluate a quarterback that you're planning on spending $40, $50 million on, you might want to get a full sample size. There might be an argument to wait a year or wait 2 years, especially in the Jets' case, and take guys that you have better looks on. Offensive linemen where you kind of know what they're going to be. Quarterbacks, cornerbacks, and some guards in the NFL, and even tackles. They're kind of tough to know how they're going to pan out in the NFL. The only difference with them is if your quarterback stinks, you can't move them to right quarterback, or right guard cornerback. If your tackle stinks, there's 3 other positions on the offensive line you can try before he's an actual bust, so it's a little bit safer of a pick.
That's fair.
I'm going to move on to something that I am very excited about, and it's Titans talk. This is what the podcast was all about in the beginning. The Titans kind of been, I think, up until the last 2 weeks, kind of on their kind of lackadaisical, they're going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to excite me. When I saw the last 2 weeks, though, I think I'm coming around.
You're seeing a team round into form here.
Adoree Jackson's addition, and I said it on the podcast when we were picking our 9 teams, is a major addition. They can't get to the quarterback, correct, but Adoree Jackson's ability to take out a number 1 receiver and move Malcolm Brown to the number 2 also now frees up Malcolm Butler, yes. Frees up Desmond King to come off on blitzes. When Kenny Vaccaro comes back, you're going to be able to run a lot of secondary blitzes, which they haven't been able to do without him. Christian Fulton's going to be coming back. That's a nice addition. And one of the biggest performances I saw that no one's talking about, and I don't blame them, was the few plays that Darrington Evans is on the field. He adds a complete new level to the Titans offense when you pull off Derrick Henry and you can start doing these wide receiver swing pass, running back swings, where he's taking the ball 10, 15 yards down the field. He's going to be a much needed break for Derrick Henry, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing 2 running back sets with them, with Tannehill in the middle, where you're starting to see like a triple read option in the playoffs. This team is going to be absolutely miserable to play in the playoffs if you're the opposing team. The offense has scored more touchdowns than anyone else. They are almost unstoppable. They average a touchdown every 2.8 drives, which is the second place in the NFL. And when you have Derrick Henry running the way he is, I don't think he's going to get 2,000 yards because I don't think they're going to play him week 17.
It doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense.
But he's going to lead the league in rushing in the second year. I think that's already locked up. He deserves, in my opinion, to be the MVP of the NFL.
He deserves to be in the conversation at the very least.
He's number 3 in Vegas odds right now. I think he's behind Aaron Rodgers and Patty Mahomes.
That's pretty cool.
That's fair.
This is a big game for them coming up against Green Bay Packers, Sunday Night Football. You're going to see, can this defense, this game can go 2 ways. This game can go, the Titans are going to get blown out, and their defense just can't handle it. And then you say, well, if they can't handle Green Bay, how are they going to handle the Kansas City Chiefs? They're really not going to be able to. But I think with the addition of Adoree Jackson, Malcolm Butler on the other side, the safeties, Kenny Vaccaro is a full participation today in practice, expected to play. And Kevin Byard now gets his first interception of the NFL season because, surprise, surprise, Adoree Jackson's there, so they're getting competent coverage so he can kind of zone out a little more and not just pick up guys and look terrible. I think that this defense is going to take a giant step in the right direction. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to say further up on that.
Tighten up.
Tighten up.
Well, I definitely agree that getting all these guys back from injury is huge because coverage sacks are a thing. And Mike Vrabel is a great defensive mind. He'll definitely be able to scheme in a way that confuses quarterbacks. Now, as you said, he'll be able to bring pressure from anywhere, right? He'll send an extra guy, but you won't know where it's coming from, right? And as long as coverage holds up, anyone can get through. I think you're going to see an uptick in Big Jeff's production.
And you wait. If they beat Green Bay Packers, they're going to find their way in every single top 5 of the power
For
rankings.
sure.
They're going to be the hottest team to talk about. People are talking so highly about the Buffalo Bills. The Titans beat the Buffalo Bills by 30 points, and they didn't practice for 2 weeks going into that game. They absolutely decimated the Buffalo Bills. And any argument saying, oh, well, the Buffalo Bills were having a bad week makes no sense. That means that they just got beaten down by a team. That's what a bad week in the NFL is. They weren't mentally prepared to play against a 5-0 team. They were looking past a 5-0 team. They were both undefeated.
Yep.
That makes no sense. The argument is completely invalid. And now the last thing.
One last thing on the Titans, right? So, yeah, I think this will go right into our next segment pretty well. They have legitimate Super Bowl aspirations for one reason and one reason only. No one wants to tackle Derrick Henry in January. Nobody.
No, and they also had a lead going into the AFC Championship. I'm pretty sure if you get through Kansas City in the AFC Championship, whatever they put you on the NFC side, you'll beat. Mm-hmm. If the Tennessee Titans go out and beat Green Bay Packers, you'll know they have the ability. Last time they beat the Green Bay Packers are, I think, a good team. I think they struggle in the same areas the Titans do, and they excel in the same areas the Titans do. The one difference is the Green Bay Packers don't have Derrick Henry, and the Titans do. Anyone who wants to make the argument that the Titans don't have a good quarterback, take a look at Ryan Tannehill's numbers.
They don't have an Aaron Rodgers. And it's not like, okay, so Packers have Aaron Jones, who's not bad, but he's not Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. Titans have Ryan Tannehill, who's not bad, but he's not Aaron Rodgers.
He has 3 turnovers on 36 touchdowns.
That's good, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers has 9 games of 3 touchdowns and no turnovers this season.
It's going to be good. So let's move on to, we gave you the 9 teams to start the year. We're going to cut 3. We missed last week because up in New Jersey there was a really bad snowstorm and we just couldn't get around to recording. By the time the snow died down, if we made the podcast, we probably would have gotten it out after, the Thursday games. And it was like, at that point, what's the point? We'll just take a week to recover. So I'm going to start cutting teams. So the first team I want to cut, we're going to cut 3 teams. We'll cut 1 team next week, and we'll cut 1 team the following week. The first team I'm going to cut from our list of Super Bowl winners or potential Super Bowl winners is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I wanted to cut them last week. I didn't even want to put them on this list, but I was forced to because when we made the list, they were undefeated. Well, what better excuse to cut them off now? They've lost 2 or 3 straight?
3 straight.
They have looked lost. Juju Smith just promised that he would stop dancing, which means there's no more fun going on that team. They're going to be searching for what is going on, and they lost that first round bye. There's no way that there's any hope that they get the first round bye now.
They might not even win the division.
Yeah, Browns are only 1 game back now, and they play them week 17.
So
they don't get right. They're going to be like a 4 seed.
I mean, they're definitely one and done. They look one and done.
Oh yeah.
This team, I was high on him, but Big Ben, he's just not the same guy.
No.
Old.
This is the lowest he's on the worst 4-game run in terms of passer rating in the past decade. This is bad.
The next team I'm going to cut off this list, and I know they had 2 impressive wins in their last 3 and then a loss that they could have won, but it's just I'm not sold on Baker Mayfield as a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I'm going to cut the Cleveland Browns. Not anything to do with their recent performance, but basically just the history of their franchise of being underachievers and a bunch of gavons, as you would say, in New Jersey. I don't like their offense as much as some people do. And I think quarterback play down the stretch is important. Yes, Baker Mayfield absolutely torched the Titans' defense. And I get it. That's pretty impressive when you put up 38 points. But the second half, he basically fell flat. And if the Titans didn't shoot themselves in the foot as many times as they did in the first half, they would have absolutely rolled over the Cleveland Browns. I'm not sold on them.
I have the same doubts for Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns as I do for the Buffalo Bills. You know, I think we don't consider either of them, real Super Bowl contenders. Not just because of, the bad luck recently with their franchises, but also the unprovenness, I guess, of these quarterbacks. Last time we saw Josh Allen in the playoffs, he was horrible. And Baker Mayfield's never even been there, so we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They're the feel-good stories of this season. They're not going to make it all the way.
No, and then the last team, this is probably the easiest cut. I think we're waiting on that Kansas City versus Miami game to see if Miami could put up a fight. They proved they were, but they also proved that they're a year away from really competing. Next year, I think I'm going to go into the year and probably have them as my Super Bowl favorites because they're going to have a top 5 pick thanks to Houston. They're going to have a lot of money to work with, and they're going to have a quarterback going into a second year. But that all happens, and
if
that
they
all
build around them correctly, yeah.
and that all
argue
takes
with it.
effect in September of 2021 and not December or January 2021. So they're about a year away from being really relevant in this league. I don't think there's much conversation there because I think that's just an easy pick. So it leaves us with the Tennessee Titans, Kansas City Chiefs, Green Bay Packers, and New Orleans Saints. Next week we'll cut another one of those teams. And then the Week 17 will give you our final 2. There is no guarantee that we will cut a team from each side. We're not trying to predict the Super Bowl with these picks. We're just trying to give you 2 of the top Super Bowl contenders. So if we somehow end up with Kansas City, Tennessee as our final 2, or Green Bay or New Orleans, that's possible. So next week when you hear us cut one, don't think, oh, well then now they're going to have to go to the AFC and cut the other. That's not right. But now let's go to our best bets. We did our picks 2 weeks ago. We went 1-1 on our best bets. We missed the over in the one game, but we had, I believe, a spread. I can't remember who we had picked.
It was 2 weeks ago.
But we did have the upset. We did have the upset of the week.
Was it the Giants?
I believe. No, the Giants was the week before. Let me go over our picks. We had the Bills -1.5, which we hit. Oh, we did have the Giants plus
Eagles.
We had
Eagles.
the Eagles.
Eagles
Oh,
were
we
Eagles
did.
and the Saints.
Yeah.
We did have the
That's
Eagles.
the one we
So
nailed.
there you go. So we had the Eagles plus 245. We hit the over in the Cincinnati-Dallas game. Did not reach 42.5. But then we took Arizona -2.5. The picks I was reading was the week before. So I do apologize for that. But let's move on to our picks this week. I'm going to pass it to Pat for the under-over week game of the week.
Yeah, this week we're going to do first ever on the podcast. We are going to take an under. We are going to take the under in the Bucs-Lions game at 54 points. Now, this is not a knock on either Matt Stafford or Tom Brady. But the real issue here is Matt Stafford's hurt. If he even attempts to play, it's going to be the same thing that happened last week. He's going to get roughed up. He's going to have to be forced out, and another quarterback's going to come in. I just don't see the Lions being able to put up the amount of points to coincide with the Bucs and hitting the over.
No, and also the other thing about this game is Tampa Bay is going to roll them over and kill them. And are you really going to send a 42 or 43-year-old quarterback out to continue to throw if you have a 21-point lead or an 18-point lead in the second half? No, you're going to run the ball. You're going to try and get your running backs included. And when you run the ball, you tend to also run the clock. Detroit can't stop the run to save their life, which means that clock is just going to move. These drives are going to be long and painful. I'm going to move to our upset game of the week. I like this game a lot. New England Patriots plus 265 against Buffalo Bills. They already beat them once. I was talking to Pat before the show came on, and I said, you know what? New England has beaten this exact same kind of quarterback twice this year. They beat Josh Allen, and then they go out and beat Herbert. They're two very similar quarterbacks. They have the big arm quarterback figured out. Bill Belichick is not going to let his team just call it quits this year because they got kicked out of the playoffs. They're playing for pride. They're playing for Bill Belichick's legacy. And they're also playing a rival. And there's nothing that, they're going to be able to get out of bed for this game. And at a plus 265 value, I like it a lot. And I'm going to move it on to the guys for our game of the week.
All right, our easy pick of the week, lock of the week, is the Panthers plus 1.5 against the Washington football team. Now, we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be for Washington football team. I believe Alex Smith's still hurt. Dwayne Haskins was maskless in a strip club. So their quarterback room is an absolute mess.
After a loss.
Absolutely after a loss.
That's the worst part.
Celebrating a loss.
He said it was a private party or something. I don't know. Privately celebrating the loss.
The Panthers
sulking in it.
The Panthers have a better offense than Washington. I think that Washington will probably commit a lot of turnovers. Antonio Gibson might still not be back. They don't really have any offensive spark right now. So Panthers at plus money in this matchup is the easiest bet you can make.
Yeah, you can get the Panthers. Now, we're not going to take it for the show's sake, but you can get the Panthers plus 104. So if you want to just forfeit the 1.5 points, because no one wins by 1 point in the NFL. They either win by 3 or 7. No one's winning by a missed extra point. I think that the value is there to kind of get your paid off a little bit better, depending on what you're betting. I mean, if you put $20 on the game, sure, just take the minus 108. You lost like 17 cents. But if you're putting $100 on, it's the difference of $12 payout. So that's well worth the bet. I do like Carolina in this game a lot. I like this board a lot. There's a lot of games I do like, but I like Carolina the most because of that 105. The 1.5 point buffer that they get, as well as the fact that they're going to have the better quarterback in the game. I think McCaffrey will be back, so they'll have just the better offense in the game. And last but not least, I think the defense, besides the defensive line, is pretty comparable. But I think that's it. I think that's the show. Have a great holidays, and we'll see you next week.